think there's going to be a lot of synergies with the presentations this morning, specifically Dr. David and Dr. Jada Makhzoumi. So hopefully it should take even shorter than I expected, and we can all go to lunch. Just a bit about Gehl, the company I represent. We are a team of urban designers, but also strategists, social scientists, and data people. And we've worked around the world for the past 20 years, looking specifically at spaces for people. The name comes from our co-founder, Dr. Gehl, who some of you may have heard of. And Jan is famous for measuring what he cares about. So in the 60s and 70s, where people were measuring how many cars are going through a street, he was measuring how many people are walking, how many people are sitting in a public square, and looking at the built environment, specifically public spaces, in a very different way. His work is now famous and trendy. When he started, he was actually made fun of, and people could not understand why he was measuring other people. And then the basic philosophy comes down to thinking about life first. That's public life, that's also nature. And then thinking about the space, and then finally the buildings. And that's the order, the hierarchy we work with on any project we're working on. So the question, so my background's in both in the environmental sciences and in the built environment in urban planning. And bringing those two together, the question that has been on my mind that I've been thinking about since 2019 maybe, is how can we best integrate nature in arid cities? And what I mean by best is how can we do it in a way that helps us meet our sustainability, our livability, our resilience goals. So that it's not kind of, there's a very kind of quick and dirty way of doing it, but how can we do it thoughtfully, appropriately, sustainably, etc. And the framework I found, which started to answer some of these questions, is moving away from the term green city or green space, looking into the term biophilic city. So if we start by simple definitions, what are biophilic cities? Biophilia is the human tendency to interact and to be closely associated with nature. So if we take that into a city level, and this is a term coined by Dr. Timothy Beatley probably 12, 13 years ago, biophilic cities are those that are abundant in nature. So nature is key. We're not talking about green spaces. We're not talking about trees. We're talking about nature. And equally importantly, and in opportunities to connect with and experience this nature. So there's also an emphasis on the human connection. How are residents, people, visitors experiencing this nature? If we go back to measuring what we care about, are we looking at KPIs that are area of green space in the whole city, or are we looking at area of accessible nature and the number of hours a person can access nature? So what we measure and what we think about in terms of green versus biophilic is quite different. So nature versus green, and experience versus just the spaces being there. So there's a whole framework set up for that Dr. Beatley set up for biophilic cities, including a biophilic cities network. And now these are the 4 pillars to assess whether a city is biophilic or not. Each of these has multiple indicators and KPIs and targets. I won't go into any of those. I'll just mention the 4 headings, and specifically the ones which I feel are not usually talked about. So as a built environment professional, most of my time goes into heading number 1, which is built environment and infrastructure. You know, how much, what are their spaces? Where are they? The actual physical form. But that's only one of the 4 pillars. So there's also activities and engagement, which goes back to the experience. So it's not good enough to just have lots of nature spaces, but what are the activities? What's the programming? How are we getting people to interact with those spaces? Attitudes and knowledge, and this was referenced in Dr. Makhzoumi's answer. Do people know what the indigenous nature is? Do people value nature around them? Is there a culture of awareness of nature? And it's a very big focus on education and knowledge exchange. And then the fourth pillar is governance, management. Nature spaces, they need to be actively managed. The policies around them, how are they managed? Who's included, who's not included in the decision making? The inclusivity angle that Dr. Salman brought up as well. So, as a practitioner in the Gulf for the past 16 years, I'm just going to share some of what I feel or I've learned are the challenges for biophilic cities. And most of these have been through conversations. When I start talking about this topic and the kind of the butts that I get from people, whether it's the person, the lay person on the street, or the developer, or the policymaker, or the educator. Water scarcity. So this is a fact, right? It's we live in the Gulf in an arid region. By definition, that means we have very low rainfall, very low potable water. The good news is there are ways to appreciate this, to design for this, to live with nature, not against nature, some of the earlier speakers talked about. So water scarcity is a fact. Let's design for it. Okay? Let's not ignore it. Let's not fight it. Let's not pretend it's not there. Just because we have desalination plants, just because we have treated sewage effluent, doesn't mean we have infinite sources of water that we can use indefinitely. We can't. We're in a very water scarce region, and guess what? More and more of the world is joining the arid environment. So the solutions we develop for our part of the world, we also then have an opportunity to work with other regions to share that and to exploit that. So these are some images from the region. The one on the right is a park in Dubai where it's just an example of xeriscaping of low water usage. The one on the left is a project by Gehl, also in Dubai, called Tarabut. And this is a structure that's built from natural materials for people, but also for nature. So it provides a shading element in a big concrete urban space. It provides shade and comfort for people to sit under, but also provides nesting spaces for birds and habitats for some of the flora. Fantastic project. It can, we can a whole hour just to talk about this one, but I'll just put it out there if anybody's interested in finding out more. Okay, this is the second challenge, the mindset that only green is beautiful. And again, something that came up earlier today, and it goes actually beyond that. It's only specific shades of green that are beautiful. Right? There's a really interesting book called Paradoxes of Green by a Harvard professor who spent a year in Bahrain looking at how people perceive green, how they value it, the different types of green, old palm trees versus new palm trees, mangroves versus grass lawns. And talking to developers, they'll say, green sells. And green is a golf course, but it's not the mangroves. Right? It's planted, human-introduced green, very water-intensive, very invasive. It's not necessarily the indigenous green. So in my mind, this is a mindset. Yes? And let's challenge it. Next time somebody says it has to look green, or it talks about green spaces, this is what I've been doing for the past few years. Scratch the word green out of green spaces, and I told this to a UN representative. Goal 11.7 of UN SDGs should talk about nature spaces and not green spaces. So anytime you see the word green, scratch it and put the word nature there. And then you're a step further into getting where we need to get to. So this is all nature from the region. It can be yellow, it can be brown, it can be green, it can be blue, it can be white, it can be the sky, it can be the earth. Nature comes in all colors, in all shades, in all sounds, in all textures. It is all beautiful. I gave a similar talk a few years ago, and a member of the audience says, okay, so what you're telling us is brown is beautiful. Yes, we can say it that way. So it's just, again, it's broadening our mindset, maybe a mind shift into really considering nature in all its colors and valuing it all and seeing it all as beautiful. Okay, this might be a controversial one, particularly in this audience, but hear me out. Trees are always the answer. Trees are always the solution. Bear in mind, I am a chartered environmentalist. Some would even call me a tree hugger. But to me, this is a myth. Okay? And I urge everybody to be scientific and strategic. I'm a scientist by training. My first degree was in chemistry. My second degree was in analytical atmospheric chemistry. And I had this discussion with someone, where this came from is talking to some of my landscape architect colleagues who love to talk about trees and how trees are we just add more trees to have better air quality, better microclimate, this and that. It's gonna solve our problems. It's gonna tackle climate change. Just have more trees. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I went back and it's like, maybe the science I studied is outdated. Let me go talk to the air quality professionals, the scientists. Let me go back and look at what the research is saying. And the research is saying that trees can be good and bad. And it depends on what type of tree, in what area, for what purpose. So this is just one example of a paper that was published in 2019 by a large group of specialists, public health specialists, landscape architects, air quality scientists, urban planners, and they all came together and looked at this idea that trees in cities reduce asthma rates, and found that there is no empirical evidence for this statement, which doesn't surprise me as an atmospheric scientist. It surprises almost everybody else. And my point is not that trees are not good or that we should not plant trees. My point is, just like anything else we do in the city, let's identify our goal and then look at what are the best strategies. So if our goal is improved microclimate, there's 10 different ways of doing that. We could put trees in some areas where people can access them, but maybe in other areas we use shading structures that don't utilize water. So this point is important anywhere we go. It's particularly important in arid regions where there's, again, water scarcity. And so we have to be extra careful with where we put trees, what type of trees are they, and are they really the best solution for the problem we're trying to solve. Okay, no, I haven't been booed off the stage yet, so that's good. This is the final challenge I'll talk about, indoor lifestyle. So people will say, okay, most people around the world spend 90% of their time indoors. In the Gulf, maybe it's 99.9%. Even if we have the most amazing public spaces, nobody's going to come because people don't want air-conditioned spaces. And my response to that is, let's invite people outdoors. So these are all outdoor spaces in the region where people feel invited. They are designed for the people. People feel invited to come out, sit in groups, walk, talk, bike, hang out, people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all abilities. And until we design spaces for people, not for helicopter photographs, not for beautiful renderings, not for amazing architecture, until you invite people, don't be surprised if they don't show up. So we can invite people to public spaces and they will show up. And it's fantastic to see the change that's happened in the region. I've been living here for the past 40 years, and it's fantastic to go outdoors and see people walking and riding bikes and having fun outdoors. It probably wasn't the case 10 years ago. Maybe 40 years ago was the case. We lost that, and now it's coming back. So I'm really looking forward to witnessing the first biophilic city in the Gulf. Would love to talk to any city officials who want that to be their city. There's a lot of opportunity here, and actually I've met some really interesting people today who work in this space. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, a lot of knowledge and expertise in the region. The ingredients are all there. We just have to make it happen. Thank you very much.